Hello, this is Mr. Peterson. Welcome to the first writing podcast of the year. This is going to be the first podcast where we talk about how to write an essay. Let's play a little game. It's called Which One of These Is Not Like the Other? Think for a moment. Obviously, it's the Ford Pinto. Does not fit. But what I want you to notice is that all the Formula One race cars look basically the same. Now, why do all those race cars look the same? Is it because the designers are boring? No, it's because it's the most effective design for going fast. Well, this is like an essay, because most of the essays that you write for school will be structured about the same. And that's not because you're boring or not original, it's because it's the best way to deliver information. And the reason it's the best is because it's highly organized and easy to read. So the form, especially in middle school, for all of your essays, will be that they'll be 5 paragraphs long. The first paragraph will be an introductory paragraph. This is where you get your reader excited to read your essay. The second, third, and fourth paragraphs are body paragraphs. This is where you deliver your information, make your argument, state your case, or prove your point. You wrap it up with a conclusion in the final paragraph, to give your reader a sense of finality and a nice, snappy conclusion that leaves a positive impression on the reader. We generally like to draw out the structure with these 2 triangles and 3 rectangles. We draw the intro like a funnel because you want to grab as many readers as possible with that hook. You then want to narrow their attention down to the point of your essay. It's called your thesis. Now that you have your reader's attention, you can deliver your information in 3 body paragraphs. And we shape the concluding paragraph like an upside down funnel because you're going to remind your reader about what they just read, and then you're going to send them out into the world ready to remember your points in your essay and hopefully to act on them. So let's talk about the introduction. We always begin with a hook. And as the word implies, you're going to hook that audience. You're going to grab their attention, make them want to listen. Television commercials do this. Pastors do this when they open with a joke or a story. Just about everything that you see around you wants your attention, and you need to follow suit. You need to grab that reader's attention. In future talks, I will give you specific details about how to write that hook. There are many ways. You can begin with a joke or a riddle. You can start with a quote or a Bible verse or a line of poetry or a line of a song. You can open with a personal story called an anecdote. You can even begin with an amazing fact. But you're going to open with something that gets the reader's attention and gets them in the mood to read. You will have a transition sentence next that narrows the focus of your audience's attention and bridges that gap between the fun, exciting hook and the business-like thesis statement. Because that thesis statement comes last. It needs to be the last sentence in the intro paragraph, and it must be 1 sentence long. There are other teachers out there that will accept a 3-sentence thesis, but I don't believe in them. I think you want to say that in 1 sentence, and everyone's happy with a 1-sentence thesis, so you might as well learn it the right way. The thesis statement is the roadmap for your essay. Remember, it's the last sentence of that intro paragraph, and it tells the reader what they're going to read, what he or she is going to read. People don't like surprises. They like to know what they're getting into. And so if you let the reader know where you're going with your essay, they're more happy with it and they're more likely to comprehend what you're writing about. There's 4 things that a thesis statement must include. It must include the main idea of the essay, and it must include the 3 body paragraphs. Please don't forget that main idea of the essay. A lot of students just assume that the reader knows by now what they're going to write, but that's not always the case. By the way, if you're writing a literature essay, this is an outstanding place in your thesis to mention the author and perhaps the title. A lot of students forget to mention what book they're writing about because the student assumes that the teacher knows what book they're writing about because the teacher assigned the essay, but you can't make that assumption. And then mention the 3 body paragraphs. Please mention them in order. That way the reader knows what to expect. A sort of a higher level bit of information. Those 3 body paragraphs need to be grammatically parallel. That means they're all the same parts of speech. So when you mention your 3 body paragraphs, they can each begin with a verb, they can each begin with a noun, they can each be prepositional phrases, but they need to be similar grammatically. An example: Abraham Lincoln was a president ahead of his time because of his Emancipation Proclamation, leadership during the Civil War, and planning for the Transcontinental Railroad. This is a good thesis because it mentions the main idea of the essay, that Lincoln was a president ahead of his time, and it mentions the 3 body paragraphs. Notice that each of them begins with a noun. Emancipation Proclamation, leadership during the Civil War, planning for the Transcontinental Railroad. You will have 3 body paragraphs. Each body paragraph, like any body paragraph, begins with a topic sentence that tells the reader what you will be covering in that paragraph. Make sure that the information in the paragraph supports that topic sentence. The rest of that paragraph will be evidence and explanation of evidence. The evidence we usually call concrete details, and then when you explain why that concrete detail matters, that is called commentary. And I'll go in depth about that on a future talk. You will end your essay with a conclusion. You don't want to abruptly just stop your essay. You want to close it a little more gently and give the reader a nice impression. The conclusion is kind of a mirror image of the introduction. It contains some of the same types of material. You're going to begin with a reference to the hook. So if you began with a riddle, you're going to hint back at that riddle. If you began with a quote, maybe you'll give another quote by the same famous person. If you opened it with 3 questions, you're going to kind of sum up those 3 questions in one statement that kind of repeats the key terms. And if you began with a story, otherwise known as an anecdote, you're going to give the end of the story. So, your concluding paragraph begins with a reference to the hook that began your intro paragraph. You will then follow it with a restatement of the thesis. You're not going to repeat it word for word. That would be boring. Instead, you're going to say the same thing, just in different words. And it's always nice to end your conclusion with a twist, which is something to make your reader say, Make them think about your topic after they've put the paper down. Maybe even to put your advice into action. I will have a future talk about concluding paragraphs in which I give many examples of these things. Now, what about a longer essay? So far I've been saying that all essays are 5 paragraphs and that it must be divided into 3 body paragraphs. By the way, a little note, the further you get into high school, the more you may deviate from this structure. My hope is that you master this structure in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and that by 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, you're starting to move things around and develop your own style, but keeping the basic organization. So one way in which an 8th grader can adapt this 5-paragraph essay is to write a longer essay. 3rd quarter, we'll be writing a 5-page research paper, and you are not going to write a 5-page, 5-paragraph essay. Instead, you're still going to begin with the introduction the same way. You're going to end with a conclusion the same way, but instead of 3 body paragraphs, you're going to have 3 subtopics. Each of those subtopics will cover an aspect of your research paper, and each subtopic will be multiple paragraphs, probably 2 to 4. So you've got a nice big long essay, but it still follows the same logic and organization as a 5-paragraph essay. So if the Hummer is your regular 5-paragraph essay that begins with that hood and then has 3 sections in the middle and ends with the tailgate, think of your 5-page research paper as a stretch limo Hummer. Still begins with that same hood, still ends with that same tailgate, but that middle section is much more spread out. And the best part about this essay structure is that it works. It delivers your information in a logical, organized manner, and it's easy to read for the reader, and it keeps you on task. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you later.